Sometimes love can become a dangerous trap, especially when emotions and feelings overpower common sense. Most people manage to stop in time, but when circumstances turn against a person, the consequences can be tragic. This was the fate that befell the heroine of our story. The story begins with Julie Marie Scully's parents, particularly with her mother, who was born in 1943 in a New Mexico Indian reservation. This reservation belonged to the second largest tribe in the United States, but life there was far from comfortable. The lack of basic amenities, electricity and running water, as well as the scarcity of jobs led to widespread alcoholism among local residents. Seeking a better future for their child, Julie's parents sent their 12-year-old daughter to a boarding school, hoping that knowledge of English would open the path to a better life. Upon reaching adulthood, Julie did indeed move to the city, where she outwardly fully assimilated into American society. Finding work at a medical facility for the mentally ill, she unfortunately fell into the trap of substance dependency. 1964 brought a fateful encounter. The young Native American woman met a police officer named John. Their relationship developed rapidly, and on July 2, 1965, almost exactly a year after meeting, they married. John later began working as a patrol officer in one of the most dangerous districts of North Philadelphia. On January 3, 1968, the couple had a daughter, whom they named Julie. Little Julie grew up as daddy's girl. Her devotion to her father was boundless, and she strived to earn his approval at any cost. Father and daughter spent much time together, especially enjoying fishing. Such close relationships between father and daughter involuntarily pushed the mother to the sidelines of family life. All this time, Julie Sr. tried to hide her addiction, but her inadequate and unpredictable behavior became increasingly noticeable. The situation worsened when she began using even stronger substances. Despite this, on November 10, 1969, the family grew. John Patrick Scully was born. The arrival of her brother changed the family dynamics. Little Julie, who was used to being the center of attention, felt sidelined. Meanwhile, the mother's condition worsened. Exhausted by constant use and unbearable withdrawal symptoms during attempts to quit, in 1973, she made her first attempt by taking a large dose of sleeping pills. Only the timely intervention of her husband, who provided first aid and called doctors, saved her life. The revelation of her addiction didn't improve the situation. The once attractive woman was becoming a shadow of her former self. Soon after, a second attempt occurred, provoked by deep depression, but again, medical professionals managed to save Julie. The family troubles particularly affected the older daughter, who was 9 years old at the time. The culmination came during her birthday celebration when, in the middle of the festivities, her father suddenly left the party to meet his mistress. It turned out that he had been maintaining an extramarital relationship for quite some time, justifying it with his revulsion towards his addicted wife and staying in the marriage only for the children's sake. That day, the mistress even drove up to the house, and Julie Sr., going outside, witnessed her husband openly displaying his infidelity, not caring about the consequences. The family situation had an especially destructive impact on the older daughter and wife. Julie, who was still too young to fully comprehend the reality of what was happening, began blaming herself for all family problems. The girl's academic performance, who had previously been an excellent student, sharply declined to average grades. Trying to improve the situation, her father decided to transfer her to a new school in Kensington. However, this step had unexpected consequences. Attractive and vivacious Julie quickly became popular among peers but fell under the influence of negative company. As a result, she began skipping classes, and her academic performance continued to decline. At 12, Julie already had an attractive appearance that drew attention from many boys. The situation was complicated by the fact that the family lived in a troubled neighborhood, causing her parents to increasingly worry about their daughter, fearing she might follow her mother's path and fall into addiction. One evening, an incident occurred that confirmed their fears. When the mother came to check her daughter's room where her friends were supposed to spend the night, she discovered the girls had run away. Panic-stricken, the woman called emergency services. Fortunately, the police were able to locate the children in downtown Philadelphia. The relationship between daughter and mother became increasingly tense, with conflicts arising constantly. Julie's rebellious behavior extended to her relationship with her father, although he, being a police officer, always knew his daughter's whereabouts. Observing how his wife Julia was failing to cope with parenting, he decided to take custody of the children himself. The mother was sent for addiction treatment, and for some time, the atmosphere at home became calmer. However, despite Julie's desire to please her father, her rebellious nature only intensified with age. She continued spending time with friends, skipping classes, and her grades remained low. When her father learned about this, he was furious. Julie, who was 14 at the time, declared her desire to quit school. Such protests were likely caused by a lack of parental attention. Being extremely attractive, she became the center of attention at any party. Naturally, the festivities seemed more appealing to her than parental approval. At this age, Julie also began her life. In 1982, the girl completed high school. Her parents, thinking about her future, wanted to provide her with specialized education. Her father made efforts to get her into a prestigious engineering school known for its strict selection process. John, using his position as a police officer, personally appealed to the director to admit his daughter outside the competition, emphasizing her Native American heritage through her mother's lineage as grounds for preferential admission. In 1983, these efforts were successful. Julie was admitted to the engineering school. Her brother, though raised in the same conditions, chose a different path, joining the Navy immediately after turning 16. However, Julie soon decided to quit her studies, seeking financial independence, and got a job. Around this time, a new boyfriend appeared in her life, Neil Ziegler, who was 6 years her senior. Their relationship developed rapidly, and in November 1985, a few months before Julie's coming of age, they married. Marriage to an older man brought her financial stability and emotional support, although the wedding took place secretly, even without her father's knowledge. When John learned about the marriage, he surprisingly supported this union, believing that marriage would be a better option for his daughter than living with her mother who struggled with addiction. However, this marriage proved to be short-lived. In 1988, the couple divorced, and Julie had to return to her mother. After returning to her mother, Julie found a new job but made no attempt to financially support the family or pay for her accommodation. Over time, her beauty blossomed even more. Whenever she appeared in public, she immediately attracted general attention. People often mistook her for a professional model and weren't shy about asking about it. Gradually, Julie learned to use her appearance to her advantage. Behind the external confidence lay a fragile and vulnerable soul desperately seeking true love but finding only brief romances. Men constantly invited her to dates and parties. It was at one such event, a yacht club party in July 1989, that fate brought her together with a man named Tim. Tim was 11 years older than Julie, had a successful business and considerable wealth, including his own yacht. In the early 80s, he founded a landscaping company that grew rapidly thanks to the boom in the American real estate market. Julie's jealousy quickly manifested in their relationship. A telling incident occurred when she caught Tim in a bar with another woman. Without thinking, Julie hit her lover, leaving him with a black eye, before attacking the stranger. The irony was that this woman turned out to be Tim's longtime secretary who was simply helping him with business matters. The situation was eventually resolved. Julie nursed dreams of a modeling career. One day she came across a newspaper advertisement for a beauty pageant. With Tim's support, who was convinced of her victory, they selected the best photos and sent them to the organizing magazine. Later it turned out this was a fraudulent scheme by publishers who were collecting free photographs for the men's section on the last page of the publication. Soon Tim discovered that his secretary no longer worked in the office. Instead, a smiling Julie sat at the desk. She essentially forced him to hire her, which gave her the opportunity to work from home and gain greater financial independence. All this time, Julie anxiously awaited a response from the magazine regarding the beauty contest. When it became clear there would be no prize places, she personally burst into the editor's office, demanding explanations about her unpaid victory award. Eventually, the editor agreed to publish her photos in the next issue. Julie told all her acquaintances about this and began preparing for the contest. The finale did indeed take place in a prestigious hotel, where 12 contestants, including Julie, gathered. However, the judges preferred other contestants. Only one jury member voted for our heroine. However, this event had unexpected positive consequences. Julie became friends with the magazine's editor, Cheryl. Thanks to this acquaintance, she became the face of the publication, and her photos appeared on city billboards. Growing popularity brought her modeling job offers. By fall 1990, Julie had become a local celebrity, continuing to work with Tim and winning prizes in small beauty contests. Despite local successes, the big runway remained unconquered. On November 16, 1991, when she turned 23, she and Tim got married. The couple had good income and could afford a comfortable life. By spring 1997, Julie's modeling career gradually gained momentum, bringing in more income. She even started appearing on television, but along with success came problems with alcohol. Married life had its ups and downs, but overall love and mutual understanding prevailed between the couple. Tim dreamed of children, and financially they were ready for family expansion, but Julie hesitated, fearing motherhood would harm her modeling career. Fate had its own plans, and in February 1995, Julie became pregnant. According to her friends, she didn't give up harmful habits during pregnancy, continuing to drink alcohol and smoke. On November 26, 1996, a girl named Katie Scarlett was born. Motherhood completely changed Julie's life, and she happily embraced her new role. During this period, her mother Julia, having overcome her own addiction, actively helped with her granddaughter. However, conflicts often arose between mother and daughter regarding child-rearing methods. The situation became complicated when Julie developed postpartum depression, partly triggered by changes in her figure after pregnancy. She became withdrawn, not even trying to return to her former shape. Simultaneously, her relationship with Tim began to deteriorate. In April 1997, the couple sought help from a family psychologist. Although Julie felt the therapist was taking her husband's side, in reality, the specialist was trying to understand her deep-rooted problems and complexes, exploring the most painful moments of her past. Eventually, the psychologist concluded that the main problem was insufficient attention from her husband to his wife, which put the marriage at risk. Feeling lonely, Julie began spending more time with friends, often returning home under the influence of alcohol. For November 1997, the couple planned their traditional annual cruise, which they had taken since their wedding day. This time they decided to combine the trip with Christmas holidays. The cruise was meant to restore their relationship, so they left their daughter with her grandparents. On November 1st, they flew to San Juan, Puerto Rico. On the cruise ship, Julie's striking appearance immediately caught the attention of George Skiadopoulos, a young employee of the ship's engineering department. The next day he introduced himself to her, presenting himself as the captain. As it turned out, the acquaintance was the result of a bet with a friend that he could seduce Julie. George was only 22 years old, had just finished college and was starting his career as an engineer. To make an impression, he added 6 years to his age and invented several professional achievements. 29-year-old Julie quickly found common ground with the young man. Tim saw their interaction but, being accustomed to his wife's sociable nature, didn't pay special attention to it and showed no jealousy. The pretend captain offered Julie a tour of the engine room before a party. When she agreed, romantic tension developed between them, leading to a kiss, but the relationship didn't progress further. Upon returning home, Julie excitedly shared her feelings with family friend Tony. It seemed that this fleeting infatuation should have faded on its own, as her paths with George were not meant to cross again. However, soon the pretend captain sent Julie a letter, which initiated their daily phone communications. In their conversations, George persistently tried to convince her that Tim wasn't worthy of her. These conversations weren't a secret from her husband. He even caught her on phone calls several times, but trusting her, didn't delve into details. Julie found herself at an emotional crossroads between stable family life and new, exciting feelings for the young suitor. She became more withdrawn, communicated less with her husband and daughter, which naturally worried Tim. Trying to restore intimacy in their relationship, on January 3, 1998, Tim organized his wife's 30th birthday celebration. The party was successful, gathering many of Julie's friends. As a gift, she requested a new cruise, insisting on a specific ship and time, obviously to meet George again. Tim agreed. On February 13, they went on another journey where she met the young man again. It was then that George won his bet with his colleagues. After returning home, Julie emotionally shared details of their encounter with Tony, the family friend and Katie's godfather. Later, Tony confessed that it was extremely difficult for him to keep this secret. Longing for another meeting with George, Julie organized a trip under the guise of a family vacation, taking her mother and daughter along. She confided in her mother about the affair, and although her mother didn't approve of such behavior, it didn't stop Julie. The plan was simple. First, all three would go to Florida. But on March 26, 1998, Julie Marie Scully left her mother and daughter there and headed to Puerto Rico to meet her lover. After returning, Julie barely concealed her relationship with George. She spent hours talking to him on the phone, exchanged explicit emails, and recorded videos about her life for him. All this happened openly, although she continued living with her husband and using his financial support. She resumed her social life, frequently attending parties and consuming alcohol. Noticing these changes, Tim suggested seeing a family psychologist in the 7th year of their marriage. Already in the first session, Julie declared her desire for divorce, which her husband firmly resisted. Having a share in her husband's successful business, which at the time was bringing in about $1 million annually, Julie desperately needed finances to execute her plan, moving to Greece with her daughter to live with George. The situation was complicated by the mandatory 20-month military service in Greece that her lover had to complete. Julie tried to help him avoid the draft and obtain an American visa, but lack of funds became an obstacle. Against the backdrop of emotional exhaustion, she began taking antidepressants. Upon learning about the antidepressant use, George became furious and categorically forbade her from taking them. Trying to cope with the situation, Julie decided to focus on her physical fitness. Due to sleep problems, she started taking sleeping pills and other strong medications. Simultaneously, she exercised actively, losing about 10 kilograms. Her goal was to return to the modeling business for income, but unlike patient Tim, the excessively jealous George categorically opposed this. Julie had to abandon her plans. No one in her circle, including her former modeling business mentor Cheryl, approved of her relationship with the Greek man. Julie's emotional state deteriorated. The situation escalated when one day Tim couldn't access important business documents because his wife wouldn't let him into her room. He had to call the police to retrieve the necessary work materials despite her active resistance. Julie developed paranoid ideas that her husband had hired a private detective to follow her. Tension in the house grew, everything was heading toward divorce. In midsummer, Julie and George secretly got engaged in the USA, although she openly talked about her plans to move to Greece the following year. During this period, Tim received bills for international phone calls amounting to $6,000 to $7,000 monthly. Finally, he understood that his wife had cheated on him with the cruise ship engineer and had maintained secret contact with him all this time. Angry, Tim decided to complete the divorce process as quickly as possible. In response to her husband's claims, Julie decided to completely restrict his communication with their daughter. She sought full custody to leave the country unhindered, which Tim categorically opposed. While the couple was sorting out their relationship, George announced his resignation from work and his arrival in New Jersey. Due to constant conflicts with her husband, Julie was under severe stress, even experiencing hair loss, although she attributed this to separation from her lover. Her paranoia intensified, she became excessively jealous of her new boyfriend and demanded constant communication with him. George's arrival in New Jersey only exacerbated the situation. He constantly inquired about money and pushed for new expenses, forcing Julie to take money from her husband while completely restricting his communication with his daughter. Tim hadn't seen his child for weeks, which drove him crazy. Meanwhile, the lover continued to deceive Julie about his financial situation and earnings. Those around her were surprised by the unattractive appearance of Julie's new chosen one and her inexplicable readiness to give up her established life for him. Close ones tried to discourage her from a relationship with a balding, unemployed man with bad teeth, who turned out to be a manipulator, liar, and pathological jealous person. However, Julie, as if enchanted, planned to spend her divorce money on hair transplants and dental treatment for her lover. When Tim learned about all this, he was particularly outraged by the involvement of their daughter in this situation. He warned his wife that if she attempted to leave the country, he could take Kate, and Julie would never see her again. Apparently, this threat somewhat sobered her up. Julie's relationship story took a dramatic turn. Although she assured her friends she had broken up with George, it turned out to be only a temporary break. A few weeks later, she traveled to Greece with him, seeking to sort out her feelings. During her stay in Greece, Julie met George's parents. The visit made an extremely positive impression on her, despite having to hide her previous marriage, daughter, and modeling past due to his family's religious beliefs. Returning to the USA, Julie was filled with dreams about a future with George. On December 6, she made the fateful decision to leave the shared house with her former husband. That day, she left her daughter and moved into a hotel, where she began taking significant amounts of psychotropic medications. Just 2 days later, on December 8, 1998, Julie flew to Greece. In Greece, the couple actively planned their wedding and life together. George convinced Julie to open a joint bank account, arguing that she didn't know Greek. Blinded by feelings, she entrusted him with all her savings, $80,000 in the account and $18,000 in cash for current expenses. After transferring the funds, Julie disappeared without a trace. On January 8, George called Julie's friend with news of her disappearance. According to his version, they were supposed to meet at McDonald's, where he waited for her for several hours, but she never showed up. The absence of mobile phones at that time made direct contact impossible. Notably, shortly before her disappearance, Julie herself had called this friend, confessing her strong longing for her daughter Kate and hinting at problems in her relationship with George. The friend suspected that Julie was planning to end the relationship and return home, but this never happened. George's version of events raised serious suspicions. He claimed Julie disappeared without her passport, which she allegedly left in the car and was taken by police. However, he couldn't specify which officer took the document. This information prompted her friend to contact Julie's former husband, Tim, who could help with the situation. Julie's last contact with relatives in the USA occurred on January 7. Julie's mother characterized George extremely negatively, describing him as an unattractive person with uncontrollable behavior. She even became a victim of his aggression when, during an argument with Julie, he grabbed her throat and pinned her to the wall, stopping only after she threatened to call the police. After this incident, Julie tried to end the relationship. The police deported George, however. Despite everything, Julie still went after him to Greece, even taking blame for the conflict. Julie's mother was convinced of George's involvement in her daughter's disappearance, although he showed active participation in the search. The family contacted the American Embassy in Athens for help. The investigation was seriously complicated by the language barrier. Greek police stations handling the case had no employees who spoke English. This is why the FBI became involved in the investigation in the USA. George's version of events constantly changed. Initially, he claimed he had found Julie, but when he learned about FBI involvement, he suddenly changed his testimony, claiming document theft. His behavior became increasingly suspicious, especially after a failed attempt to withdraw money from their joint account. Their wedding was supposed to take place on January 23, 1999. During this time, information about the missing American was actively spreading through news channels and radio stations. George reacted aggressively to the media coverage. In a phone conversation, he yelled at Julie's friend who had contacted the media. Publicly, he insisted on his innocence, actively giving interviews and trying to justify himself. 16 days after Julie's disappearance, the main suspect George found himself in an interrogation room. Initially, he repeated the version told to the media, but after 4 hours of interrogation, he confessed to murder, insisting it was an accident. During questioning, he cried and seemed to sincerely regret his actions. However, his testimony was inconsistent and contradictory. He would claim Julie had never disappeared, then admit his guilt again, then deny any involvement in the event. According to George, after moving, Julie began to become disillusioned with Greece and with him. Her homesickness and longing for her daughter grew stronger, and she wanted to return. Despite his attempts at support, the situation only worsened, causing him serious concern. In the last days before her disappearance, Julie was constantly crying. The situation escalated when George's mother learned about Julie's previous marriage and her daughter in America. She openly expressed her disgust and insisted that her son end the relationship with a woman of such a turbulent past. Their constant arguments were so loud that the couple was even evicted from their hotel. George's behavior became increasingly controlling and violent. He forbade Julie from communicating with her family and systematically used physical violence. It later emerged that his mother suffered from schizophrenia and was often hospitalized, and her son inherited certain traits of her character. Despite his short stature, George had an inflated self-esteem and demonstrated superior behavior. The missing woman's relatives and friends repeatedly noticed his manipulative nature and tendency toward aggression at the slightest disagreement. Besides the incident with Julie's mother, there were other instances of violence. Once Julie herself had a seriously injured arm, although she justified the injury as an accidental cut. Despite all this, she continued living with her abuser. The fatal events unfolded on January 8, 1999, during their trip to Athens. On a deserted two-lane highway, an ordinary conversation escalated into another argument. George stopped the car in a desolate spot, hidden from other traffic. Getting out of the car, he immediately attacked Julie, squeezing her throat with all his strength. The tragic events unfolded on the day when George lost control of himself. During interrogation, he told the police that he felt like he was watching the situation from a side when Julie was screaming. He wanted only one thing, for her to be quiet. Later, the man claimed that everything lasted just a moment, but forensic experts determined that it takes at least 3 minutes to strangle a person. In shock after what he had done, George talked about his intentions to burn his beloved's body and scatter the ashes over the sea from a cliff, after which he planned to jump after her to reunite. However, he abandoned this plan. Sitting in the interrogation room, he confessed that he had tried to commit suicide in various ways, shooting himself with an air gun, throwing himself under a truck, attempting to overdose on medications. None of these attempts proved successful. The reality turned out to be far more horrific than his initial testimony. After the murder, he placed Julie's body in the car trunk and drove to the nearest gas station. After purchasing gasoline, he returned to the crime scene, where 2 lakes were located near the road. The attempt to burn the body failed due to sudden rain. After the failed attempt to dispose of the body near the lake, George transported it to his grandmother's house. There he found a large travel suitcase, but due to rigor mortis, the body wouldn't fit inside. Faced with this problem, he made the horrifying decision to separate the victim's head. During interrogation, he described in detail how he lifted Julie's head by the hair to his face level. According to him, even in her empty eyes, he saw horror, but she still looked beautiful. Before packing the remains, he kissed her lips. The body was buried and then dumped in a swamp, while he took the head to Kavala and threw it from the cliffs into the sea. 19 days after Julie's disappearance, her family and former husband Tim were informed about George's confession. He showed investigators the crime scene and helped locate the remains. Tim personally traveled to Greece to arrange the transportation of the body back home. The confession was broadcast live, causing real shock to the killer's family. His mother suffered a stroke, and his grandmother was stunned. Tim's father expressed the opinion that George should have died right after Julie. Despite this, numerous publications in the press appeared that shifted blame onto the victim herself. Greek authorities characterized this crime as the most brutal at that time. The defense tried to prove the defendant's insanity, citing hereditary schizophrenia on his mother's side. George himself asked for the harshest punishment, although the death penalty was not available in Greece. In the United States, former husband Tim became a pillar of support for the family and friends of the deceased. Despite Julie's infidelity, he proved himself to be an honorable person. He was the one who received a diary with memories about their mother for their daughter, compiled by the deceased's friends. Julie's relatives were convinced that George had initially manipulated her for money, having learned about her husband's wealth. He pushed her toward divorce and receiving substantial compensation, which he planned to use for his business. However, before her death, Julie discovered his true intentions and refused to finance his projects, which proved fatal for her. The trial began on November 27, 1999. A peculiarity of the Greek judicial system is the absence of juries. Cases are heard by 3 judges, which expedites the process. There were no defense witnesses at the hearings, and the defendant's confessional testimony lasted about 5 hours. On December 6, the court delivered its verdict, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. However, the justice system failed. In 2002, George filed an appeal, claiming insanity at the time of the crime. As a result, his sentence was reduced to 23 years with the right to further appeal. In 2007, he was released, and now he lives with his new family in Kavala. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Until next time, friends.